The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed in this podcast
blah, blah, blah. It's entertainment, people. Enjoy the show. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Unboxing Photography. I'm Ricky, and on the other side is Jim, my trusty companion. Thanks once again for taking the time out of your busy day and giving the listeners something to listen to. So, what's new with you since last week we spoke?
Well, the season is starting to change in New York. Hi, everybody. How you doing? We've had our first couple of cold days here. This is always kind of tough because I know that when the cold weather is coming, it's going to be harder to get certain types of pictures because not as many people are out. I stop people that I meet on the street and ask them to take a picture. So if it's really cold, sometimes it can be a little bit challenging because, people are kind of hurrying to get here and there. Mm-hmm. So the clock's kind of running down on the nice weather in New York. And at in the beginning of September, there were three big things at the end of the summer. There was, for me, there was the Juve Parade. There was New York Fashion Week, and then I shot the Coney Island Clown School. So those were three intense photographic experiences where I shot a lot of film. And then after that, you get this thing of you've done all this work, you have tons of negatives, tons of post-production to do and everything. And when that's over, I've been so busy and so immersed in creating stuff that then you get into, now it's oh man, I go out, walk around for a week and, it takes me 2 weeks to finish one roll of film. And I'm Yeah. So it's this weird balance of being crazy busy and then things being quiet. How about you? What's going on?
So outside of school, which I'm trying to finish, I have a goal date of completion in January of next year. And Other than that, I have a growing backlog of photos that I will shoot and I just upload them into Adobe Lightroom and I just leave them there. I haven't seen any since I would say mid-August, and there's probably about close to 2,000 photos I haven't seen yet. I just got some film back last week and about 6 rolls back from development today, so more to add to that. And yeah, just balancing shooting and school right now and work, obviously.
It's that's kind of that's kind of the thing, especially if you're a film photographer, when I meet people and they're either just getting into film or they're interested in getting into film, and they kind of that's one of the big hurdles is, okay, if I take the pictures once I buy the film, what do I do with it afterwards? Do I go get them scanned? Do I get somebody else to develop them? And who am I going to find to develop them? And then I get scans or whatever. And there's a lab here in the city the lab that I use when I occasionally get somebody else to do my stuff, called LTI Lightside. And I was talking to the guys that run it, and they said a lot of younger people don't come back for their negatives.
Yeah, they get the QR.
They just get the scans. They get the scans, and that's it. They shot on a film. They got the scans, and that's all they care about. So literally the company, they have this note posted on front, and the way that we started asking about it, they're like, oh, we throw away negatives after X amount of days. And I'm like, why do you even have to post that? And they're like, oh yeah, we throw negatives out every single week. I was like, why? And you said, a lot of people just don't pick them up. They just want the scans, So. I mean, I get the whole. I think that's a certain type of photographer probably who's into that. That's like when I hear about young people who buy records and then don't play them because they just want to support the artist. They don't have a turntable. They want the thing. They want the artifact. So they just put it in this is my collection. Although I've never played the needle has never touched these records. I'm like, why would you buy records and not listen to them? Same. Why would you shoot film and then let the negatives be thrown away? But I guess it's just maybe there's a little bit of a disconnect there in terms of, hey, whatever scan they made is not, the end all be all. There might be much better scanning technology in 2 or 3 years or 5 years or 20 years, or you might lose those files and then you never, you don't have the neg, or, you can scan the neg and have the neg, depending on who's doing the scanning, the negative can look very different, So that whole thing of like kind of what to do. And I don't know, I know we were talking about subjects, and one of the things we were thinking about talking about was post. I don't know if this kind of bleeds into that, but figuring out how to do your own thing, and then how that bookends with what you want your look to be.
Mm-hmm.
If you're shooting film, or if you're shooting digital, like all of that stuff is all part of the other subject we thought about talking about that you sent me, which was craft. Like post is part of the craft.
Yeah. I definitely agree. There is a large community of people who are just chasing the film look. So they'll shoot the film and then they just want the scans. We don't have any labs like the one you're referring to, so I don't have that luxury. So I have to send my film away, but I see it every now and then on the interwebs and whatnot. But same thing, like I invested all this money on film. I want to keep my negatives, right? So, yeah, I keep my negatives so that whenever I felt the need that like, oh, I want to revisit this image, maybe I have better, like you said, better techniques on scanning, right? Because it's art. It's not just you throw. You could, but if you want like the best out of that film negative, you got to get your settings right, and you got to get all the tweaks. I don't know what software you use. The Negative Lab, right?
Yeah, and I mean it's kind of ridiculous that like Lightroom, that like Adobe doesn't have that built in for color. And there's a solution by Cinestill. They've got some plugins which I kind of messed around, and it's free, and they were like kind of like whatever. But I use Negative Lab Pro, which is good. But the fact that it isn't just something in Lightroom is kind of fucking ridiculous, especially for all the money that those thieves want to charge for their buggy ass software. I'm surprised that I have to use like a plugin to like deal with film. But yeah, that kind of hybrid workflow. I mean, I think the thing that's cool about having a negative also is that if I ever did want to do, take it to a printer and say, print this, I could print what's kind of cool is if I found a printer who I really trusted to print my stuff, I could do a reference print as a print from my inkjet, and bring that with the neg, and then say, this is kind of the look that I was going for, so that they can understand. Because that was like, if you read about the relationship between any of the photographers, or whatever, Cartier-Bresson, whoever, who didn't print themselves and who gave directions to a printer, they would say, okay, I want you to do this or that, or, blah, blah, blah. And they would get work prints, and they'd go back to give feedback, and then the person would go back in and do more. But if I'm able to kind of print it the way that I want in digital, and off a scan of the neg, and then bring that to a printer and say, I want it to have this kind of a look, then that'll give them a great reference for knowing like what I want the blacks to be like, what kind of shadow detail I want, where do I want the highlights brought down, all those kind of things. And then that print, if you do a photographic print on, platinum, palladium, or, you do silver gel and whatever it is, and get like a big print of it, that probably moving forward, especially with all the stuff that's happening with AI and, et cetera, like actually having a photographic print printed from a negative by somebody who's like a master printer using like the chemicals on photographic paper, blah, 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 that will intrinsically have more value than something that's just run off an inkjet printer, and doesn't have like, I'm not saying that there's no craft involved in doing that. There's a negative is a starting point. but bringing it to a master printer and saying, make this into a real photographic print, I think is a different level of craft.
Yeah, I've never really done printing in like dark rooms. Never been in a dark room. Never did like paper printing. I got photo quality printers that I print on. I don't think, I know I haven't got anything like professionally, like if I was to hang in a museum or anything like that. I don't do enough output for that. I think now I'm just kind of enjoying the process. So
yeah, and I think that's a lot of people. But I think that like if let's say you're just doing it for fun or you're just doing it for your family or whatever, and you found somebody who was like a really good printer and you had negs,
mm-hmm.
And especially if you gave them a reference digital image, like let's say if it was pictures of like, your daughter and you wanted to have something that was like, instead of something sitting on a hard drive, that kind of gets back to like having the artifact, having like a thing, all of this digital stuff that we're doing, as transitory as it is in the real moment, right? The stuff that we put on Instagram that gets its 10 seconds of fame and then, whatever, and then moves on. The things that we share with everybody it's such a tiny blip of anybody's attention span. Just try to imagine when we're gone and all this stuff is like sitting on hard drives. It may not even be current formats or anything. It's thinking that some descendant of ours is going to figure all that stuff out, figure out how to get those out, look through. I mean, I've got like 50 or 60,000 images in the Lightroom. Like, so is one of my kids going to go through all that stuff and pick out all the bangers and say, oh, these are dad's old pictures. Let me make sure I get the good ones and make, so they can be handed down across the generations. No. So I print what I think is really good and I save them in tiny little portfolios. But if you had something that was like a great picture of somebody, like maybe when they're young or something like that, and you did a photographic print and got it framed, that might be the kind of thing that's sitting on the wall of, when your daughter's great granddaughter, and she's going to say, oh yeah, this is a picture of my great grandma, or something like that. So
that I definitely agree with all of that. And I think for me, whenever I do select the image to print, it's something meaningful. Just because I don't normally print all of my work. I don't print a lot of my work. I try to do one print a month. And then, I don't know, I don't know. I think I shifted my priorities. And I just did some prints a couple months ago. And I got them on my wall back there. But that's because I was forced to do them. Put the photos on the wall. Oh, yeah, I got to print those. So I did that. And
who forced you to do it?
My girlfriend. Yep. She's very, like, she loves art. And we share that passion for art together. She supports my photography. And she's the one that forced me to do those prints. I sequenced just a bunch of photos that kind of matched and went, printed them. Yeah, but I don't know what I'm trying to say about prints. I want to do more. I think that's overall. And I think when I could dedicate a majority of my time to photography again, then I want to focus on doing that. Because I do agree, like, I got roughly the same amount of photos in my Adobe Cloud, right? 50,000. Well, it's like, what are you going to do with like 50,000 photos? Maybe print at least one copy of each of those, but then what do I do with all of those prints, right? So I think going through it and picking the ones that mean the most.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I'm reminded whenever we talk about this stuff or whenever I talk about these kind of things on my Substack, like, we all come at it from a different place, like craft and, you know, all the stuff that goes around it is dependent on, you know, what your end goals are, you know, like some people do things for the pure enjoyment of it, and other people do it and are serious as a heart attack about it. And, you know, some people could take like pictures that we would put in the trash and they'll put it up on their feed and be like, oh, I love this picture or something like that. We're all coming at it from kind of a different place. So I think when I was a little bit younger, I believed in kind of like an absolute truth about a lot of things. Like, this is what's right. This is the way to look at things. And then, you know, the older you get, you realize that, like, because your opinion changes about things. So if you start to say like, all right, well, you know, if I thought something was an absolute truth, and then over the last 10 years, my opinion about it is completely different than it was 10 years ago, then that kind of tells me that there really isn't any absolute truth. It can evolve over time. It can evolve because of context. It can evolve because of where you come from, what your motivations are, all that stuff. So I think that, like, it kind of applies the same way to how people appreciate photography, you know? Like, I'll look at a picture and very quickly, based on my motivations and my understanding of photography, I'll make a judgment of what that picture's about and about the photographer a lot of times. And it's through a filter of, you know, that it's my personal filter. But that filter is not the absolute truth, you know? And there's no one way of working. There's no one definition of something that's good. There's no ultimate way of taking a picture, scanning a picture, printing a picture. You know, like, sometimes someone might spend their entire career trying to perfect something, and somebody down the hall might spend their entire career trying to build a body of photographic work that's based on making what the other photographer would perceive to be, or would call, mistakes or errors or bad craft. You know, like, I know that there's some photographers out there who smear their lenses with Vaseline before they go out, so that every single one of their pictures looks like that 10 bar lens. You know, it's a cheap 10 bar. That like 90 millimeter 1930s Leica portrait lens that costs $1 bazillion. Why? And, you know, so in this age of, oh, I've got to have the brand new Hasselblad X2D2 or whatever, that, you know, 100 megapixel, blah, 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 image, how many stuff of image stabilization. And great. And then there's a person out there who's like literally taking their thumb and rubbing Vaseline over a lens.
Yeah.
You know, so is one right and is one wrong? You know, it's all how we're kind of coming from it. And if like your life right now doesn't give you room to do that kind of thing, then cool. Maybe at some other point it will, you know?
Yeah.
But I mean, the good thing is if you have the negatives, you can always say like, okay, well, now I've got the time and I can do it. If they get thrown in the fucking trash,
yeah,
you go back and go, oh, I realized how much control you have in RAW. Let me go back and deal with all my own negatives. Oh, these are all like, you know, 10 megapixel JPEGs. Where's the negative? Oh, I never picked it up.
Yeah.
You know,
it's probably,
you're kind of screwed at that point. So.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So whenever I get into something, I hyper focus on getting everything that I want now and may possibly need in the future all at once in the very beginning. So like stuff that I was like, well, I might not use this today, but maybe I'll use it 20 years from now. I got to buy it. I don't know why. It's just a personality trait of mine. Recently, I'm trying to get into watercolor painting. So I did the same thing. I bought all of this stuff, paints, and I keep looking at more paints and all these pigments. And I was like, and then I see like YouTube videos and tutorials, and like this master painter only got like 4 pigments and he blends everything in himself and he gets all of the colors. And then it just comes to like I don't need all of that stuff, right? So I got all of this printers and the paper that I know I will use at some point. And when I get there, I think it's gonna be worth it. But yeah, I think it's really just what it is that we're trying to achieve now, like you said.
Yeah, and also I've been guilty of that too. And I think I mentioned before, I used to be really into motorcycles, right? And so, and motorcycle racing. And so I went and got some instruction on how to ride on the track. And I would go out and, you'd see guys show up and they had like a brand new Ducati and everything was carbon fiber and they had like leathers with their name on them, custom helmet and all this other kind of shit. And they had everything. And then they'd go out on the track and they'd be really, really slow. So they have the prettiest bike, the most expensive shit, $40,000 Ducati with all this extra stuff on it, and go out and they'd be slow. And there'd be some guy on some beat up piece of shit, 15-year-old bike with ratty fairings on it that were taped together with crappy leathers and a shitty helmet that probably should have been thrown in the trash. And he would roast everybody.
Yeah, he's just gone.
Yeah, and it kind of, I mean, sometimes, I think that there's this kind of stereotype, which probably is somewhat based in truth. That like when you see sometimes, like there's like that Leica backlash of like you see people and they've got like the Oberth bag and they've got like the leather half case and they've got like, a special edition and they've got like, some new super expensive, I've got the close up sunlux, or whatever, all this shit. They've got all the shit. And then they're like, it's like, what do you do? Oh, I'm a street photographer. And you look at their pictures a lot of times and it's like trash. And then you see somebody with some beat the fuck up old M3 or whatever, or some old, APS-C camera or something. You look at their work and it's brilliant, like, I think a lot of us want to kind of like live the dream and, it's that thing of like, well, buy into the dream, and we buy into the dream, but invariably you get to a place where you buy into the dream, but you realize that like it's the only thing that's really going to make the dream a reality is the work. It's not the toys, Mm-hmm. So if you had 2 or 3 pigments and you just sat down and said, I'm just going to paint something today and just started painting, that's what it is. It's just like if you're a writer, I've read all these books about writing and really the people who are the best writers, they all say the same thing, which is stop thinking about it, just sit down and just start typing. Mm-hmm. And if it's crap when it first starts, that's okay. It'll get less crap over time, but dedicate yourself to the craft, sit down, just do it. And anybody who wants to get better at anything, that's it. That's the mantra. That's what I tell myself. If I look at a bunch of pictures that aren't successful, I go, okay, well, let me look at this roll, look at what I did that wasn't successful and try to not do that next time. Or whatever I did, let me try to change my approach or refine my approach, Mm-hmm. But if if you spend your mental bandwidth thinking about, I've got 20 different lenses in the closet and I've got, 6 different camera bodies and this and that and blah, blah, blah. And you spend your mental bandwidth like thinking about all that shit. What am I going to take out today? What's the next lens I'm going to acquire? What paintbrush do I want in my box of lenses? How do I want to render this? Yeah. You spend all that time. That's not actually taking the picture. And it's about the picture,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's about painting the watercolor or about pressing the shutter. That's it.
I definitely am guilty for spending more than 20 plus minutes looking at my cameras and lens. I don't have a lot of lenses, but the lenses I do got, I always fight. And I'm very much so the person who has the beat up leather jacket that you referred to in the motorcycle, where when I first started, I was probably the guy with the new carbon fiber motorcycle that you just mentioned with the nicest leathers. And I was the guy with the backpack with every single lens I owned. And I would go out there and I was the slowest, but I had to change my lens. And now I'm just single camera body with one lens and I make it work. And I'm comfortable and I'll probably take a way better photo now than I did 10 years ago when I was 16 lenses in my backpack.
Well, and that, if you had 16 lenses now, you could take better pictures with those 16 lenses than you could all those years ago.
Yeah.
But having, the reason why you're better is just because you've been doing it,
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's why, like, when I was talking, you know, if you look at any of the Ralph Gibson interviews that he's posted online, he always talks about, oh, you should get a 50 millimeter lens and shoot nothing but that for a year. And then, you know, once you've done that, get a 90 or get a 135 or get a whatever, and do nothing but shoot with that lens for a year. And then just because you'll learn how the lens sees, you'll learn how your camera sees, you learn how you see, all that other kind of stuff. And it's true. Like, I think when I use certain lenses, you know, over the course of a couple of weeks, like right now, I've been using on the R9 the 100 millimeter Apo a lot, and it's a macro, so you can get really, really close to stuff. But when I see things, because I've been using that one lens, when I see a scene, I already know what it's going to look like before I bring my camera to the eye. Like, I know what the box is going to look like. I know how far away I need to be. I know how far away I need to stand to make something what size I want it to be in the frame, you know? Or if I go to the macro end, I'll see like a flower and I'll go, okay, let me get really, really close up in this, and, you know, and blow out the background, blah, 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 whatever. Having that awareness of just using the same tool all the time is helpful, because you're not puzzled. That's, you know, that's what he said. Like the most beautiful sound he ever heard was the sound of a zoom lens being thrown into a swimming pool. Because, you know, with a zoom lens, you know, I see people working out there with 28 to 70s or whatever. You kind of never know where you are in the focal length, and you never know what your relationship is to the subject. So I'm not saying it's an unusable tool. And if you're going into like a situation like where if you're going to shoot like a sports game or something like that, and you don't know how close or far you're going to be away from the subject, that's great, you know, to have a tool like that. You know, if I brought a 21 to a basketball game, I'd be a fucking idiot, you know. But if I decided to shoot a 21 at a basketball game, like maybe I had the information, like, okay, you're going to be right next to the bench, or you're going to be, you know, right behind one of the, you know, you're going to be right behind one of the baskets or something like that, and see, you know, and so I'd kind of inform where I was going to place myself or how close I was going to be based on what tool I was going to bring, you know. But, you know, if you've used the tools enough, you know what kind of pictures you're going to want to take with it, and what you're going to need to do to be successful with that. That's kind of why I only shoot with primes.
Yeah,
because I want to be single-minded. I want to be compelled. I want to be forced to use the tool the way the tool is meant to be used.
I agree. So I also like that weird predicament we always put ourselves in, like, I'm only going to shoot this lens. And then you go and use the 21 as an example, is like you get there and then you're like, you're having fun time shooting. You got all of the wide shots that you wanted. And then now you're in a position where you need zoomed in, or you want zoomed in. You don't need zoomed in. You want more of a tighter fit. And you're like, damn, I only brought this. What do I do now? Some people give up. Some people leave, go home. Maybe, I don't know. Or, well,
if it's a professional thing, though, you know, if you're talking about something where you're just going to go out and shoot for your own head, then, you know, then okay, well, I see a zoomed in shot, but I can't take the zoomed in shot because that's actually a good thing. Mm-hmm. If you go out with a 21 and you see a shot that would be a good shot zoomed in, you're like, oh, I really want a zoomed in shot, but I don't have a zoom lens with you. That's great, because it's like, okay, well, that's a challenge. How can I get a shot out of this, given that I don't have the thing that I would reach for in order to get it? Can I shoot it a different way? Can I get closer? Can I rethink what I'm going to actually shoot? That becomes something that's stimulating to your creative mind, and it's helpful. If you are in a professional situation, like in a wedding thing, let's say, and a wedding shoot, and, you know, there comes a time where the couple is going to kiss and you're way at the back of the church and you don't have a zoom lens, then, you know, you're going to get a pissed off bride and groom. Yeah. So it's like, if you're going in a professional situation, you have to make sure that you have the tools. It's like, if you have to show up to build a house and you only bought a drill, but you didn't bring a hammer and all the other shit that you need to build it, they're going to be like, okay,
Yeah.
I showed up with my drill today. Is there any drilling? So you have to bring the tools that are appropriate to whatever the situation is. But if you're doing something that just as from a personal creative standpoint, using that kind of like one lens and forcing yourself to use that one lens and having those painful moments of being like, this is not the appropriate tool for what I see. That's a good thing.
I agree.
Because you might learn something from that,
I put myself in those predicaments often where I force myself, no matter what happens, I have to just find how to make it work. And I'll give you a perfect example. Last year, I won't use names because I got called out for name dropping, and they're like, "Oh, all you do is name drop." Anyways, it's not about name drop. I was out shooting with a friend, two friends, and I had my 90, and they had a various selection of lenses, and I was very content with my 90. I was shooting it. I found everything, and then we approached this one location where, when I looked through the camera, I was like, man, this is too tight. I really wish I had a wide lens. And they're like, oh, you want to change? And I said, nope, I brought this purposely. I got to make it work. I got to find how this is going to fit in my vision. So I did. I never took the lens off, and I kept it on, and I just made it work. And actually, I think the images are better now than they would have been if I had a different lens.
Yeah, and the other thing is that in terms of like pulling art out of something, making an image, right, as opposed to taking an image. If you go into, let's say, some kind of like, I don't know, tea house or coffee shop or something like that, and it's like a whole scene, there's somebody behind the counter, there's people eating and stuff like that. Like a lot of that stuff, like I really think that like there's sometimes focal length can impact it and make you lean a certain way in terms of how you shoot. And like, let's say like the whole visual storyteller thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think that like certain focal lengths, like people who use 28s and 35s, you'll see a lot of times, oh, this is the perfect photo, the perfect focal length for visual storytelling, because it's including a lot of information in the frame. That's like a fancy fucking buzzword for, oh, it's a wide shot, so there's a lot of shit in the frame to look at, so that kind of gives you more context. That's all that it does. It just, a wider lens gives you more context. Tell me a fucking story with a 90 or 135 in a tight space.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody can take a picture of a bunch of people in a coffee shop and say, you're in a coffee shop and people are serving coffee, and I see all the coffee machines and people drinking coffee, and okay, that's the story, I guess. But what if you went in there and you just said, I'm going to do a story about the satisfaction that people get from drinking coffee. So I'm going to use my 90 to take extremely close photographs without people knowing it of them putting the cups up to their mouths.
Mm-hmm.
And that's going to be the story.
Yeah.
Or the steam rising from the cup as it comes up to their face. That's another way to tell a story, right? And you wouldn't be able to do that with a 35. Mm-hmm. But you might, if you had a 90, very quickly, if you continue working on your craft, you might have your brain go, let me tell a different story, because I'm not telling a story with a wide lens. I'm not giving a lot of context. So let me make the context be the coffee cup and the mouth. Mm-hmm. I was watching this video about Trent Park and about the photography he did on the streets I think it was in Sydney. And he was returning to the same street corners for weeks and weeks and taking very long exposure pictures of these street corners. And then doing this thing where he would crop in to people's individual faces really super tight. So their faces were, especially because it was shot on film, and I think he was using the FP4 and pushing it and doing longer exposures. Like, it was extremely pixelated, very grainy. And so their pictures almost look like X-ray scans. So they just look they weren't high resolution. They kind of like almost like came apart, in a particular way. And the frame was whatever, it's 35 millimeter frame, but he's zooming in on some person's face, like in a crowd, and disembodying them from, or not disembodying them, decontextualizing them from the scene and from all the other people in it. And the pictures almost look like these like weird little ghosts or something, you know? But here's a guy who said, I'm going to take a picture of a whole street corner with a bunch of people standing on it in rush hour. And he took photographs of the same people because he was going back the same time of day every day. And they'd look different, or they'd have some of the same habits. He'd catch the same guy yawning, you know? And that was what the picture was, you know? But he decided to make the work about a super, super, super tight crop on a 35 millimeter frame just on one person's face because of it had a specific look to it. Mm-hmm. You know, again, it's just, what are you trying to achieve creatively? And it doesn't need to be, and I think this is kind of what bothers me about a lot of YouTube videos. There's a lot of people who kind of say, this is the way this thing needs to be done, or this is the correct way to do things, or this is what a 35 millimeter lens is good for, or this is what, you know, in the example I just gave, right? Because I watched a video recently on somebody saying, like, you know, that the 35 millimeter was like the perfect artful lens or something like that. I can't remember. And I was like, what the fuck does that even mean? What does that even mean? I mean, you could blow that assertion apart in 100,000 fucking ways. You know, like, you can do something artful with any lens, with any camera. You could take, like what Trent Park did, and take a 35 millimeter frame and zoom in so close that it's like, you know, most people say, oh, I want to take close-up pictures of people standing across the street. Well, let me put like a 400 millimeter lens on it so I can zoom in specifically on somebody's face. That's not what he did. He shot with a lens that wasn't that tight, and then he went in and he did super crops and took a ton of the resolution away from it, so the picture looked like what it looked like. So was he not telling a story because he didn't use a specific focal length, you know? Mm-hmm. So people who are coming to the craft, people who are coming to photography, who are seeing all this unqualified babbling, like, here's my opinion, this is what this stuff means, kind of stuff on YouTube, have to remember, and even for what I'm saying right now and what you've been saying, it ain't necessarily so. There ain't one truth. There's a lot of ways to do this shit, you know?
So that is true. And when I was in high school, I was horrible in math. I'm still horrible in math to this day. Nothing's changed. But for some reason, I would always do, like, you know, you have to solve it out using the formulas. My formulas were always wrong, but somehow I would get the right answer. And whenever I would show the work to the teacher, they're like, this is way wrong, but I don't even know how you got the right answer. And I also didn't even know because, again, I'm not the greatest academically on math, but it was right. So there is many possible solutions to get to the right answer. And the right answer is from within, right? Going back to what you said. I don't think people are really focusing on like those type of advices, YouTube videos. People are probably, I think when they first start off, they're interested. But then once you kind of start to learn the craft, you kind of start to see, you make your own formulas, right? I don't see it as popular, those type of, like, this is how you do this and this is the only way. And I think because a lot of people are starting to, like, say, oh yeah, don't pay attention to that kind of instruction.
You know, there's no the great thing about, you know, YouTube and stuff like that, and it certainly applies to this video as well, is that there's no real barrier of entry. Anybody can get on YouTube and kind of gob off and say, this is the way to do it, and that's the way to do it. And I think there's a lot of people out there who are interested in stuff, and they're looking for resources, and they're looking for stuff that's kind of easy to digest, right? Anytime that I've been in a teaching adjacent situation, because I haven't done any teaching myself in terms of charging someone to teach them. But I've been in many, many situations where I've been with other photographers who ask me a question about something. And, or I've been like, Paul Reed came and did a class in New York over the summer, and I went out with him, and he had a bunch of students, and I went and I walked with him, and I had students in that ask me questions. Or I've been in, gone to like a Leica Academy event where a photographer was talking about their craft and about what they do, and then someone would come and make some comment to me, and make some assertion that they had heard, that they had seen on YouTube or something like that. And I think the thing is like, there's all this information out there, and it's very kind of surface level, and it's good in terms of just like getting you started. But experientially, you'll learn what parts of that stuff resonates with you or not the more you kind of work. And I have found in all of those situations, I mean, especially in Paul's thing, like people would come to me and they'd make like, like there was a guy who came to me and he had a Sony with a 2870 on it, and he was like, or maybe it was a 7200, and he was like, yeah, I try to use this, I'm taking street photography, and I came over here to get better with my street photography. A lot of times my pictures are blurry and, blah, blah, blah. And I was saying like, oh, well, what's your shutter speed? What aperture you're using and stuff like that. And he's like, oh, I don't know, And basically he had seen something talking about how like a 7200 or 2870 was like the most versatile lens, blah, 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 And so when I started saying like, oh, well, you should shoot at 28. If you're going to take surreptitious shots, should back the lens up, leave it set on 28, shoot at f8, put it on auto ISO, set the shutter. Like, do you want a freeze motion or you want some motion blur? Okay, here's what just try, and just kind of, and he's like, what? And so just even trying to figure out in the Sony how to set those things he was like, that's what's great about an M is it's like, you could just show somebody like real quickly, like this is what you do. Right. But, and then like last week I was out, and there's a guy who's got a YouTube channel that talks about, that shows people who like are dressed really fashionably, and then he interviews them, and he's got a tremendous amount of followers. And so he stopped me and he said, I'm getting into still stuff now too, because I want to like interview the person and take like a couple of still photographs. And he's like, I'm just curious, like all this stuff, like shutter speed and ISO and aperture. He's like, I'm just trying to figure all that stuff out. What's the most important thing to focus on? And if you think about that, like, I mean, that's a fantastic question. Out of the exposure triangle, if you're a beginner, what's the most important thing to focus on? I was like, wow, okay, how do I answer that question? And I was like, probably the most important thing to focus on is aperture, because how much depth of field do you want in the picture? Do you want to include what's behind the person, or do you want to blow out the background? Because once you decide that, then you've got to think about, okay, that's what's going to influence what your ISO setting is, depending on what your light's like. That's going to have an impact on what your shutter speed is going to be, because you're going to have to like, what your light's going to be. And then I said, and then obviously, you've got to think about shutter speed with motion blur. You think, okay. I said, yeah, because if your shutter's slow, you're going to get movement. Okay. And then with ISO, you've got to think about noise. I'm like, oh, on that Sony, you're probably going to, probably not going to get noise until you get it over 800 or 1600 ISO. And he's like, oh, well, what do you mean noise? And so I'm trying to explain this to him.
Yeah.
But in like, literally in like 5 minutes of just kind of having a conversation with somebody, you realize like, it's not that hard to kind of teach somebody to think about like some very, very basic things and just say, just practice on this. If you're going out there and you're getting blurry pictures of people because you're leaving the camera on autofocus and you're shooting it at 70 millimeter while they're walking by and you're trying to frame it super fast, that's why your pictures are going to be shitty.
Yeah.
Remove, let's take the autofocus off. Let's preset it at f8, let's put it on auto ISO, so that you can just worry about the frame. And so let's take all that shit away. If you get like 10 minutes with somebody, you can make them, I think everybody who I've met in those situations, when you move away all of those kind of, preconceived notions or all that bullshit that's been pumped into their brain on YouTube, people can get pretty far down the road.
Yeah.
And I mean, that is the value of learning from somebody who's actually going to actually teach you something and listen to what you have to say. Because that's the thing, YouTube it's just broadcast. You're taking stuff in. And if you hear it the wrong way, or if you have a question or whatever in the moment, none of that, all of that is missing from it. So you're just listening to something. When you're getting taught by somebody who's actually, there's give and take. And if they hear that you're misperceiving something, they can correct you.
Yeah.
Or if you have a question to better inform yourself, you can ask them. There's value in that. And I think that will help you with your craft also. So, yeah, anyway, I don't know how I got off on that whole teaching jag, but you know, most of what's on YouTube, very little of it is really educational. They're opinion pieces.
Yeah. But I do think there is some great resources for like people that want those type of information for learning. There's lots for those. I wanted to pose a question because you said something and then it made me just think of something. Do you think like people who get into street photography, right? And we use the person that you said was at the Paul Reed as example, right? You had the camera and you were explaining some settings and didn't know. I think it's possible people see an outcome and that's where they want to start, right? So no basic knowledge of anything. They just like whatever the outcome is and they're like, oh, I can do that. And they try to start there and work backwards.
Yeah, and that's like the analogy of the motorcycle rider before. Because he saw a race or he saw some guy who was dressed up and had the like some racetrack thing, and he thought, if I buy all that shit, that's my outcome. That's where I'm going to end up. And there's a lot of people go out and buy like an M and a 35 lux, or go drop like 15 grand on a camera, or actually that's closer to 20 grand. And then go out and are completely confused and have no idea what to do. But they might have done that because they saw, I saw what Phil Penman uses, or I saw what Paul Reed, like the person actually said, I'm in love with Paul's pictures and I want to be able to take pictures like him. And my pictures look absolutely nothing like his. And so there's some, I really do think that people start with like, what did they want to do? And when I first started taking pictures, I had like some ideas, but I had a lot of like, well, let me take pictures and see if what I thought I was taking is what the output is. And a lot of times it wasn't. And I realized it was because I had no technique. And in like jazz music, right? Like one of the things they talk about when you listen to a lot of jazz musicians is, because everybody's like, oh, jazz breaks all the rules. There are no rules, blah, 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 all this other stuff, or they create their own rules. But all of those players learned all the basics and their rudiments and everything, and theory and all those other kind of things, and got technically super proficient to the point where they knew all that stuff. And then they were able to break the rules because they knew what the rules were, or because they had followed the rules for so long. They're like, okay, now let me see what happens when I don't break the rules. So everybody's got to go through that thing of, let me learn the fundamentals. Because that guy that I taught about those basic things, just because I taught him those basic things doesn't mean he's going to make a good photograph. But it's at least going to get him in the ballpark of where he's not going to have a blurry piece of shit picture, because he's got a camera that he set on autofocus on a moving target when there's a bunch of people on the street at windows and buildings and everything. And the autofocus is trying to decide, well, what do you actually want me to focus on? And then he's like, and then the picture's a complete mess. And then he looks at Paul's picture and is like, his picture is a piece of shit. It's nothing even remotely like what Paul is doing. And it's like, okay, so let's just get you in the ballpark of understanding the exposure triangle and putting the settings on your camera so that you can at least have a chance of getting something in focus. Then after we do all that, let's talk about the frame and about composition. And then once we get past you understanding the frame, then let's talk about connection with the subject. And then once you get past all those things, then let's start working towards you having a unique visual signature, so that what appeals to you about Paul's pictures, you haven't gone through all that shit just so you can do exactly what he does.
Yeah.
Right? That's the time frame or the time lineage or whatever of what we do. we learn what the fuck we're doing, basically, like just how does this work? And then we start going, and what am I doing? And okay, now I know what I'm doing, and I'm doing something that's like somebody else has done. Okay, now how do I do my own thing? You know, that's kind of what this is. And now once I've done my own thing, let me refine that and refine that and refine that until it's something that's great, you know? But there's a lot of places along that timeline where people will drop off or get stuck. And I see it right away when I look at people's pictures, you know, because you'll see somebody that can take like a really sharp, well-exposed picture of some kind of street scene of somebody kind of crossing the street on a rangefinder or whatever. But then there's all this other stuff in the frame that doesn't really go there. And I'll see like their entire feed is that. It's a picture of a person crossing the street. And that's all it is. It didn't go beyond. They got to a certain point and then they just stopped. And it's because they're not looking at the picture and no one's saying to them, what else is happening in this picture? Why is this here? Why is this in the background?
Yeah.
Why didn't you move over here? That's what that's what teaching.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's like, if you look at like Paulie B's videos, like he has an office hours thing with Ruben Ratting. And that's one of the things that Ruben talks about, like in when he's sitting down and he's reviewing students' photo. I think the last video just went up was him reviewing pictures by some guy. And, you know, when he's looking at all the work, he's pointing out the things in the picture that it's like, you know, asking questions like, you know, why is this here? Why isn't this bigger? This is distracting from this. And he's helping the guy get to that next place. So anyway, teaching can be a good thing as long as the teacher knows what the fuck they're talking about.
Yeah. I definitely agree with that. Very selective with the people I've wanted to teach. And I think they have elevated my work. So I know they have.
Me too.
So for me personally, I think I'm that person where I see an outcome and I have to figure out how it was done. And I will, again, hyper fixate. I get focused, locked in. That's all I want to do until I can get good at it to try something else. So I'm a work backwards type of person. That's just my personality. Even going back to the painting, I'll go through the internet just to see a reference photo, and there's crazy technique that you need to master before you can paint like this, right? But I'll keep on going until I get it. And then every time I put the brush to the paper, I'm learning something new, and I'm like, okay, now this starts to make sense. And it's the same with photography. For me, the hardest technique I ever had to learn at the time was panning. Some people call it shutter drag. When I went to like photography school, it was panning. So that was the hardest thing. And for some reason, I have this ability to be aware of when I learn something. When I learned how to pan, I just felt it just click. And I was like, I got it. And now I know how to do it. It's a hard technique to master. And like, if I do it, I don't get like a perfect one in one try, right? You got to keep going. And then I'll get a really good one. But when I was practicing and I didn't know how to do it, it was just every shot it wasn't what I wanted. And then when I got the one I wanted, I remembered how I got it, and then it clicked. And then I realized that's what I need to do. I don't know. Do you have similar characteristics whenever you learn something like that?
I find that like I'll get obsessed with trying to learn something or do something or master something. And then once I've learned it, I kind of move on. And then if I want to return back to it, sometimes it's a little blurry and I have to get back up to speed with it. But, you know, there's this, I'm going to make another analogy. There's this, I mean, one of the most famous jazz musicians of all time was Miles Davis. And if you listen to everything that he did throughout his career, when he first started and over the course of his career, he went through all these kind of evolutions of what he was doing. And there were times that he was doing different work where, like, he put out this record, like he put out the most successful selling jazz record of all time, which is a record called Kind of Blue. And like everybody, like that's their reference jazz record is Miles Davis, Kind of Blue. But then within like 10 years of that, maybe even 7 or 8 years of that, he put out a record called Bitches Brew, which is like this fusion record, which sounds completely nothing like it. Like if I put on the two things, one of them's like relaxing, like you want to have a cocktail party. The other one is like, you know, at times like you're having like a bad acid trip out of like some kind of voodoo ceremony. You know, like it couldn't be more different, right? And that frustrated a lot of people. A lot of people criticized him about it when they heard those records and thought he was selling out because rock and roll was big in the US. And so he was trying to get that audience and whatnot. And it alienated a lot of people and nobody got it at the time. And now people look back on it and they say, this is a landmark record and look at what he was doing. He was challenging himself. He was trying to like learn he mastered something and then he moved on. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of, that resonates with me, you know, like, I met a photographer on the street. It was odd. I noticed his technique before I introduced myself. During Fashion Week, there was a guy who I'm not sure what camera, I thought he had an M, but he was like standing on a street corner. He was getting somebody to walk across the street. And I noticed the person that he was photographing before I noticed him. The person he was photographing, I also tracked down later and photographed because it was a really interesting person. But he was directing the guy to walk across the street, telling him where to look. And then Rick, he was doing this thing where he had the M up to his eye. Mm-hmm. And as the guy walked the street, he panned, followed him. And then he just did this like J-shape whip downwards. He like did a drag like in a J shape. Yeah. And I was watching it. And he did it multiple times, the exact same movement, multiple times. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And then he said goodbye to the person that he took the photos of. And then he came up to me because I had two bodies on. I was strapped to me. I think I had a Rolly and a Mamiya or something. And so we started talking and blah, blah, blah. And he gave me his IG. And I looked and he's got like 50,000 followers on Instagram or something like that. A lot more than I do. And I looked at all of his work. And it was beautiful, you know? It was like all these like shutter draggy things, these people. And it had a certain look to it. And it was like, it had this, I could see the J. Because I could see that at the bottom of the frame or in part of the frame that I could see that it was like dragged down and then it came off to the side. Like it had this consistent kind of thing. And because I had seen his technique before I saw the photographs, I was looking for his technique in the photographs and I saw it very clearly. And he's got all these, 2,000 likes on his pictures and stuff. I don't have anything like that in any of my pictures. And, I'm like, wow, people really like this. But the judgy part of me was like, okay, so I scroll down his feed and there's dozens and dozens or hundreds of pictures that are like this. And they're interesting because it's all different people or different scenes, a guy riding a bicycle, a person talking on their phone, someone dancing, whatever. But it's all kind of that shutter drag kind of whip kind of thing. And what I thought to myself was, okay, so you've done your bitches, your Kind of Blue. Where's your Bitches Brew? Mm-hmm. It's like, you've done this one thing and you've done it 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 and you've done it. And what the fuck else can you do?
Mm-hmm. One look photographer?
Or what are you going to do next? Mm-hmm. Or, and okay, the images are like kind of different because you're taking pictures of different people in different settings, but it's all the same thing. It's all the same gimmick. So what's next? And that's important to me, mm-hmm. but I guess it's not important to that person. And that doesn't mean that their photography isn't good, or they're not a good photographer, or they're limited, or that there's something wrong with them. It's just that for me, I'm kind of like, okay, you have a shtick, a gimmick, or whatever, but are you going to evolve it? Are you going to do something different with it? And maybe that person never will. Maybe they'll make the same photographs for the next, 50 years. Maybe they'll become like a hugely successful photographer and sell images for $90,000, and it'll all be that shit to the day that they die. Yeah. And that's all they'll ever do, and they'll feel accomplished, and people will say that they're geniuses and whatever. But I look at it and I just go like, you're doing the same thing over and over again. And it's all I got to do is look at 3 pictures, and I saw your technique and I see it in the 3 pictures. So what are you going to do next?
Yeah. I got a question before we go to the next segment. It's kind of something you mentioned. So I was writing it down when you were telling the story. When do we know we mastered something and it's time to move on?
When the light is flickering out in your eyes and you're dying and you take your last breath and your spirit leaves your body. And the reason I say that is, and again, I'm giving everybody the free Ralph Gibson master course by giving him all the information he gave me. He said to me, and it really resonated with me, that he's old enough to know, and he's been doing this long enough to know how good a photographer he could be.
Mm-hmm. Could be.
And basically what it could be. Because he's seen all these other people's work, and he's seen all his work, and it's like, what's your favorite photograph? And he says, he's like, the next one. Whenever you think you like kind of mastered something, I'm going to come up with another music analogy. Neil Peart in Rush, drum player in Rush, who passed away sadly a few years ago. And Rush this week just announced they're going to be going out and touring again, which made a lot of people happy, with a new drummer, a young woman who played with Jeff Beck. Anyway, Neil Peart, universally in rock, was considered to be like the king shit drummer, amazing, like, oh my God, fantastic player, like the creme de la creme guy. And at some point in, I think, the late 80s, he just decided to completely re-examine his technique and go back to his rudiments and challenge himself to play like differently than he had been playing, completely change the way that he held the sticks, where he positioned himself, everything, just completely recombobulate it, because he wanted to play looser. He wanted to change up what his playing was like. So he basically went back to complete basics. He was what anybody, no one would say that he wasn't a master of the drums. But once he had mastered his mastery, mm-hmm. he went back and decided and figured out a way to go to a new level of mastery.
Ultra,
in the martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
They have black belts with all, red tip, red belt, all these like different tips. There's guys who've been doing martial arts for their entire life, who still go to clinics, who still go on some retreats, maybe some Zen thing. They go train on a different martial art. So they do cross training that'll inform their art and increase their vocabulary. There's all these examples of people who are considered to be masters who then went and got education in a different space or in a different way to kind of expand themselves and did it, expanded their vocabulary and added a new level of mastery to their mastery. So to get back to the example of the guy who has mastered clearly making these J-shaped motion drag photographs and getting all the likes that he gets on Instagram. Okay, well, what if you did it on, film camera in black and white, or what if you changed the way that you drag the shutter, or what if you used flash, or what if, he's mastered what he's mastered, but then you could go to like let me change it up. Let me see if I can, add something new to this and move it further down the line. And again, it's a timeline. Mastery is not, I don't think it's not a finish line. It's a kind of a way of life. If you're trying to master something,
mm-hmm.
You continue to try to get better.
Yeah.
You know, like I just read Sally Mann's book Artwork, and she talks about how, you know, when she's printing, because she does all her own printing, how she has tons of curled up negatives, curled up prints in her gallery there, where she's like, no, this wasn't it, this wasn't it, this wasn't it, this wasn't it. This is a person who can sell photographs probably for prints for $80,000, you know,
mm-hmm.
which is like, this is shit. I got to get better at this. I've got to, you know. So I think you can get to a point of comfort with what you do,
mm-hmm.
but I think the comfort is dangerous. You know, mm-hmm. like if you get really comfortable with what you're doing and you're like, oh, this feels good, I'm going to do this for a while. Okay. Do that for a hot minute, but then tell yourself like, all right, I don't want it. This is not a lazy boy. Creativity is not a lazy. You don't sit in the comfy chair and just,
big comfy couch.
You know, I think brilliant work comes from a place of discomfort or a place of being challenged, let's say. Mm-hmm. And I just saw this exhibit in New York City. I don't want to get into it. It's too long a story, but there's this exhibit in New York City that's going on right now of photography. And I went to go see it, and it's got a lot of attention. It's very high profile, blah, blah, blah. I went, and there's a couple of photographers I know who are in it, and I like their work. But the rest of the work that I was looking at, I was like, none of this was doing anything for me. And I'm just like, these are just pictures, you know? And I thought about it for a second, like why I didn't care for it. And I realized it was because none of it was like challenging. Mm-hmm. There was nothing challenging. I wasn't looking at it and saying anything about like, oh, this person has a really interesting perspective on this. You know, it was mostly portraits of people. Yeah. Like, there was nothing challenging about this. But the people whose work was really good are people who I know are constantly asking themselves the question of how can I make this better? And they don't work from a place of comfort. Mm-hmm. And again, some people want to see challenging photographs, but other people want to look at pictures that are just nice pictures. So as that relates back to your question, I'm not saying that again, it gets back to that kind of disclaimer. Not everybody has to like be a master their mastery in new masterful ways. You know, some people just want to take a picture of their kid that's in focus. I get that. And that's fine. That's fine.
It's the hardest feature.
But that's not what gets me. Yeah. But that's not what gets me off at all. Not even remotely.
I have to zone focus. Well, when my daughter was younger, like I just absolutely love taking pictures of my daughter. Like I can, from when I wake up to when I go to sleep, I can just take her picture all day. But when she was younger, and I'm sure it's the same for a lot of, you know, children, they don't stay still, always going.
Yeah.
And that was basically what made me appreciate zone focusing the most. That I know I'll get it every time, right? So, yeah. Anyways, that was
that reminds me like of a little like you know, like 5 years ago or something, or 4 years ago, I got into like a little kind of like flame war on the Leica forum with somebody who like some dad was asking about what he should buy, whether he should, you know, if he was thinking about getting an M10 and like a 35 Lux. And, you know, and what did people think? And they were like, what kind of photography do you do? And he's like, I mostly take pictures of my kids. And, you know, people were saying, oh, get this, get that, blah, blah, blah. And you know, some people were like saying, yeah, definitely get an M10 with a 35 Lux. And I was like, that is the dumbest fucking advice I've ever heard. Get a 28 Q. Just get a Q, put it on autofocus or not, don't put it on autofocus, put it on F8 and just put it on auto ISO. And, you know, and you'll get keepers of your kids. Don't tell somebody to get a rangefinder with a 35 Lux. Take pictures of a fucking toddler. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. And then people are like, I don't know, you could take a great picture of anything. I'm like, yeah, exactly. Like you could take a picture of your kids with that. Yes, it's not like you couldn't. But yeah, do you want to make it really hard for yourself? You know, I mean, I guess you could descend Mount Everest on a surfboard if you wanted. I don't know why you would want to, but yeah, you can do a lot of things. But how hard do you want to make it for yourself? So anyway.
Yeah. You got to do 0.95. Anyone asks me, you got to get M11P Safari with a Noc Deluxe 0.95. So don't ask me because that's what I'm going to recommend.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. All right. That was a really great segment. Now we will go into photos of the week. I have to say your photo is a really great choice. It's the first time I've seen this. I don't know who the photographer is. And if it's you, I'll give you your flowers. So let's.
If it was me, man, I would be I would be pretty old because that picture was probably taken in like 1945 or something like that. So no, that is not me.
All right. So here we go. This is Jim's photo. So here you go. Please share.
So this is a photograph by Horst P. Horst, who is a kind of foundational fashion photographer, who had his first photo exhibit in the 30s, worked for Vogue starting in the 30s, and kind of worked through his whole life doing fashion photography, and had a tremendous amount of pictures in magazines like Vogue and exhibits all over the world, photographed famous people, and is one of the people who kind of created modern fashion photography. And this is a picture of a very famous model named Lisa Fonseca-Greaves.
Mm-hmm.
The thing that I love about this picture is just, again, the shape, the proportion. There's so much that's wonderful about this photograph that you can point out. First of all, I'm guessing she's putting her chin on the edge of some kind of ball or table that has scrolled lines on it. If you look at her face, you can just see a hint of her eye is in the light. There's almost like this Rembrandt light on her face and a little bit on the hat, but there's shadow that goes halfway across her face. The hat is in partial darkness, partial light. The hand and that shape, which kind of, look at the V on her hand and then look at the V at the bottom of the frame, the upside down V. It's a reverse of what her hand is doing, right? And it's a complete black. So, and then there's that monolith behind her, that marble block, and it's got some light there that also kind of references the angular light on the angular drawings scrolling on the object that she's resting her chin on. And then there's all this negative space at the top of the frame, which is unusual because you would think that this might be more effective as a tighter frame, but there's something about the space of it behind her that gives you this sense of kind of mystery about what it is. But I think it's just from a compositional standpoint, again, if there was like somebody in the background, like talking to somebody else, it ruined the picture. The picture, and okay, this was in the studio, it was posed. It's a lot easier to control this kind of stuff in the studio. But if you look at where everything is, where the light is, where the shapes are, everything, it's an incredibly well-considered, well-composed photograph that shows mastery of light and emotion and composition. And this picture probably is, from the 40s, I'm guessing, the 30s or the 40s.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So Horst P. Horst. So there's another photographer who was kind of like his assistant and who was also important, whose name was Hoyningen-Huyn or Hoyningen-Hoyn. I'm not sure if how you pronounce it, but those two guys, when I started getting into like kind of like fashion photography and portrait photography, I looked at a lot of their work because it's just stunningly beautiful and just really well composed.
Yeah, so this image is really, really great. It's very surreal for me. When I first seen it, I thought the bottom was reflective. I thought it was like the top of a car. But then upon further inspection, I realized it's not. But if you look closer to the woman's face, it's kind of textured. The little flowery, I don't know if that's a brooch or a pin or it's actual flower, but it's kind of...
What's great about it is here's the thing about it. I'm glad you pointed out the flower. If you put your finger or your thumb over the flower, what it actually looks like, it has to be there, because if it is not there, She just looks like she's really like that's her body, and she's really like Violet Beauregard in Willy Wonka. Like she's got when she turned into a blueberry. Yeah, she's got that big balloon body, right? So if you put your thumb on the screen and you cover up that flower, she looks like a big blueberry, like Violet Beauregard. Yeah. The fact that the flower is there emphasizes that it's not her; it's a surface that she's resting her chin on. And I'm sure he saw that, and that's why that object is there, to show you that there's something resting on it, and it's not actually her body, or it's not meant to look like it's her body.
But even the hat, if that is a hat, I don't know. I'm going to say it's a hat.
Yeah, it's a hat. Yeah, it's a hat.
It's a weird looking hat. I'm trying to really look into it, but how they got it. Well, I mean, I know this is all like staged photography, like staged and portrait studio staged.
Well, they used to have things called hat pins also, which would pin your hat to your hair. So women sometimes would have, if you look at like old film noirs and stuff like that, they would wear hats, but sometimes some of their hair was like sticking out of the side of the hat. So you could see a little bit of their hairstyle, and the hat wasn't necessarily just something that was like stuck on top of their head. So it's funny how hats used to be like such a thing. And now the only people that wear hats are like douchebag hipsters. They used to be. But like, or so if you're trying to be ironic, you'll wear a hat. Like my anytime I, God forbid I try to put any kind of hat on my head, I'll come back, I'll walk in the door, my wife will be like, "Are you trying to be ironic?" I hope so. Yeah.
I'm glad I don't.
I'll go put the hat away. Yeah, exactly. I'm not talking about baseball caps. I'm talking about, like when you see somebody with the Indiana Jones hat and like a trench coat, I'm like, dude, if you're Harrison Ford, you can pull off that look. But if you're not, you just look like look like somebody cosplaying Harrison Ford.
I like those hats, and I have a little. I got a couple of them. I have one from Paris that I had to buy because it was like the most Parisian hat I seen, and I never wore it because I don't have like the facial features to wear these type of hats. But I like them, so I got like two. I got a Kangol one that's not a wide brim one, but it's more kind of like 1980s Run DMC kind of style, which is more, it does fit, right?
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway.
Well, but the reason why it worked for them, right? Because like all those kind of old style hats, like it's about what else you're wearing. If you're wearing like a really amazing suit and shoes and like, you've got a hat and you look clean, you look neat, then that's great. They managed to figure out a way to make those hats look good with tracksuits. And so if you're wearing a tracksuit or a sweatsuit outfit or whatever, like, that's like, streetwear with one of those hats, you look cool. Yeah. But if I'm just wearing like a t-shirt and jeans and sneakers and walking down the street and I wear that hat, it doesn't work, So it's about part of it. It's about the whole thing. It's about the ensemble, So anyway.
Fashion Week. All right. So now we will transition to my photo of the week. I'm going to let you have first go at what you feel about this image, and then I'll talk about it after.
I like this.
Okay.
I like the balance. Of it. This is one of your pictures?
It is one of my photos, actually. It's one I just got back today. I don't know why. I actually really like this one myself.
I like this picture. I like this picture a lot. I would have cropped it very slightly to remove that light to the right of the window frame on the right-hand side of the frame.
Yeah.
Because my eye goes to that. And what I want my eye to go to, what I think is really interesting about this is that you've got these round shapes of the jars or the cups, and then you've got these very angular kind of things happening with the corner of the chair protruding into the bottom of the frame, and the table that they're sitting on and the tray have these like very sharp angles. And I like the diffused thing that's happening, which must be like a curtain or something, or I guess, that's probably an 095 shot that's blowing out the foreground, right?
It's not.
Or is it a 135?
It is neither.
What lens was it?
It is neither. It's a 180 lens.
What is it? Okay.
It's a 6x7 frame.
Oh, okay. Okay. But if you take your hand and you put it over the right hand side of the frame and just cover, this is what Gibson used to do in all my pictures. You just cover that little thing of light. I think it becomes a stronger image. But that's just my taste. But I love the way that, like, there's the table leg comes down and disappears into darkness. And then if you go over towards the left of the frame, the edge of the tray that it's sitting on, it almost looks like whatever you're focusing past, there's that like white thing that almost looks like a table leg. And it's obviously not a table leg, but it looks like a phantom kind of table leg running down from the tray. That's really cool. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know if you saw that when you framed it, but it looks really cool.
So you are somewhat correct. I will say when I did frame this, which was very difficult because, so these are teacups, you're correct. And this is not a table leg. It's actually part of the chair.
Yeah, I didn't think it was a table leg, but it looks like a table leg. It suggests a table leg. So.
Yeah, right on this back side where you see this, where you say you want to crop. That's where my back was because I was sitting down. And honestly, I just liked the way the cups looked with the colors, and I thought that it was matching the paper on the window right here.
Yeah.
And then I had like a lot of matching color elements from the table and everything. So initially that's what I saw, and then so I used the Pentax 6-7 II with this, with the 180 2.8 lens, which is equivalent to like 1.4 or something like that whenever you do that.
But it's like a 90. It's like kind of like a 90 equivalent of medium format, right? At a 180.
Exactly. Yeah. So this is equivalent to a 85, 90 mil. But I was so close and I had to be in this super weird, awkward angle. When I did compose it, this was not in there, but I think because the range, the viewfinder wasn't 100% coverage.
Yeah.
But yeah, typically I kind of account for these things, but it wasn't perfect. Either way, I got most of it out. And I'm not going to lie, I wasn't expecting this kind of feathery look of the chair to look so feathered. And diffused. Yeah. I actually did get really lucky with the fall off of the light from the highlights into the shadow. So
the exposure is great. Mm-hmm. The exposure is great, and it's like the contrast in this is great because I like the fact that the light coming through the window is diffuse, and then it's lighting the cups, and then on the opposite side of the cups, it's diffuse, but it's color. Mm-hmm. It's diffuse color with multiple different shades in it, and then as you go down towards the bottom, you get this other like hit of something that's illuminated. The bottom of the chair. And that's surrounded by all this like complete blackness, like crushed blacks. So, I mean, this is one of the things that I really like in picture. When I take a picture, what I look for is I like really, really crushed blacks and really high contrast. And so this like thing that you have going on here of like perfect exposure, like you didn't overexpose the cups, which would have been easy to do because they're white. Question: where'd you meter this? Did you handhold a meter, or how did you meter it?
I metered it with the built-in meter, and whenever I shoot the Pentax, I keep it, so it has an exposure compensation dial, but I always keep it at 0, and I overexpose anywhere from 2/3 to 1 over.
Yeah.
2/3 or 1 stop over. And for that camera, I'm pretty good with how to meter. So it took some time. Again, going back to the craft.
Nice job.
You learn your stuff, but thanks.
Yeah, nice job.
I only picked it. I was going to pick a well-known photographer, but I've been going down that route. But then when I got this back, I seen this feather and I was like, oh man, I don't know how I did that, but yeah. Came out better than I thought.
No, it's good.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
It's just interesting, and I do like that phantom leg coming off the bottom of the tray there. That's that like white kind of phantom leg thing. It's just a nice happy accident. Mm-hmm. But the texture of the cups is really cool too.
So initially, what caught my eye, because I'm always looking for different things that I, like you said, like a photographer's got to take a picture of everything, right? So what initially caught my eye, and I always do this when I see things, is shapes. All I kept seeing was squares. So where I was sitting, I saw the square from the chair, which is right here, the square from the seat here, and then I saw this square, and then a square here, and like everything that I saw was squares. The square in the windows, and then I picked the subject for the cups, and I just kind of tried to align my squares in a somewhat meaningful way.
Yeah, it's a good one, man.
Appreciate
Definitely.
it.
I feel, it's funny. I don't show my, I feel weird about showing my pictures on here because, I mean, part of it is maybe like some kind of like, I don't want to say inferiority complex, but just something like, I don't want to, like, whatever I say in terms of my opinions about anything that we're talking about, I don't want to have that be informed or validated or devalidated by somebody looking at my pictures and saying like, okay, this guy took this picture, so he's correct, or he took this picture and I don't like it, so that means everything that he's saying is probably wrong. Mm-hmm. And I'm probably overthinking it, but I'm pretty opinionated, and so I feel on some level like if I show my pictures that's going to influence how people perceive the things that I'm saying, which maybe is true and maybe is not true. But anyway, that's why I never supply my own pictures. I mean, if anybody wants to see my pictures, they can easily see them on my IG feed, which is at the Trickness. So it's easy enough to go look at my pictures. But I did have, just like, if I, having said that, having caveated that and self-deprecated a little bit, hopefully that's how it came up. I will now toot my own horn a little bit because I have a bunch of pictures. There's a magazine out of Europe called Dark Rooms Magazine. Mm-hmm. And some of the pictures I shot at the Coney Island Clown School are in the current issue of that magazine.
Hey, there we go.
It's issue 9. Yeah, it's it was one of those rare occasions where, because I never ever send my stuff out, like very rarely, to anybody, enter any competitions or anything like that, very rarely. And I had just posted some stuff on Substack, and a couple of people restacked it. And then the guy who runs this magazine wrote to me and said, "Hey, I really like these pictures. Can you send me a whole bunch and write a story, to go with it?" So I think there's like 10 or 12 photographers featured in this current issue. It's free. So it was my medium format pictures of students who graduated the Coney Island Clown School this September.
There you go. That's what's up. Gonna clap again. Congratulations.
Thanks, man.
It's not easy getting selected for these magazines. There's a lot of them now, and they keep coming up, which is cool because they're highlighting the artists, right, and supporting the community, which we need more of. So yeah, that's what's up. But I do want to say it's okay to showcase your work sometimes. So whatever feelings of, I don't know, like you don't want to show your work because it may kind of put you in a weird position. I hope you don't feel that way and are comfortable. If you ever decide like, hey, I really took a really great shot, let me say it's my photo of the week. Thus, I used mine. So, and I hardly ever do because, I don't think I ever make photos of the week. But this one caught my eye and I felt it deserved to be my photo of the week.
Yeah, and it's a good picture, man. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So hopefully we do see some of your work on here. But no pressures if not.
I'll go through and I'll see if next time I'll get a picture that I think was a good picture. I'll show it. I promise.
There we go. All right. So I do want to thank you I appreciate your time as always. I want to thank the fans, listeners, supporters as well who made it this far. Me and Jim love these conversations. Well, I know I love them. I can't speak for Jim, but I think he loves them too.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah.
But yeah, hopefully we continue to record and give you guys some good content. Hopefully it's beneficial for you, and if you feel the same, you're like, yeah, I resonate with that. So yeah, hit a like.
Yeah, and if it doesn't, if it's something if it's something that they don't agree with, or they have a different opinion, a different take, if whatever, just hit us up. Post in the comments or send us a DM on IG or whatever. I love talking about it and having civil discourse.
Yeah,
because that's the thing. I think we need to get to a place where we may have completely different opinions on things. That's how this is supposed to work. Somebody likes a song, somebody doesn't like a song. Somebody likes a photo, somebody doesn't like a photo. I'm interested in why people might agree or disagree with me. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's funny because people agree with you and they agree with you, and you listen to why they agree and you go, wait, no, that's not what I was saying at all. And then sometimes people disagree with you, and I'll go like, oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't think about it that way. And it's helpful, Yeah. But it's just nice when it's not wrapped in the usual, online, designed to butthurt someone, If it's civil discourse, I'm there for it. So
yeah, just put some meaning with it. Same.
Yeah.
Same for
That's
you.
it. Cool.
All right. Well, once again, thank you. I appreciate it. And everybody have a great, wonderful day. Unboxing Photography.